Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Live here on Keystroke Medium. I am Josh Hayes here with Scott Moon and the one and only James S. Aaron. Coming at you live finally after like 2 weeks of not coming live because, man, life is crazy and holy crap.
My defense, I'm only half live. I literally woke up like 4 minutes ago.
Always, it's funny. Like the stress for me used to be like going live and like talking in front of people and like doing all that stuff and not knowing what to say and looking stupid on camera. And since I do that all the time, I just don't think about that. The stress for me now is waiting for Scott to log on
and look stupid in his own way.
You hear that, Scott? It's all your fault.
I like to cause Josh stress. It's really the only thing I'm here for now.
Oh man, welcome everybody in the live chat. Thank you for bearing with us over the last couple of weeks as we get some stuff kind of worked out and situated. Kayleen Williams gets the KSM first clap of appreciation.
Probably get it on both sides for that because to kick off the the goats, the KSM show goats.
Keith Taylor's in the house. Hello, Keith. How are you? Good afternoon. I think it's going to be a fun conversation today. We're going to talk about writing in 2021 and oh, hey, there's Lou. I made it. It's about time, Lou. We've been waiting. Now the party can get started. We had a conversation about this in our writers group a couple of weeks ago, and I thought it was a really good conversation to have to get multiple takes on the same issue, which is hey, it's 2021 and you decided you want to be a writer, and what have we learned over the last almost 10 years of doing this, and what kind of advice that we could give, and what differences in starting now than starting back then. And I figured that'd be a good conversation. But first, let's talk about updates. James, you want to go first, man, and talk about what you've been up to?
Yeah, that's exciting.
You guys.
I know. No, it's been so I'm pretty deep into Vagabond Space 3, which is my series for Athon that I'm finishing up for them. I'm concurrently doing edits and drafting at the same time, which is kind of a new thing for me. And I'm really trying to work on getting some dictation workflow down. And I've been going through a succession of new microphones, trying to find something that works pretty well. And I think I finally found one. And so the really big news in my life is I finally got my toddler into daycare. And so I know. So I don't have to, I am still getting up pretty early to write and work for a little while before she gets up, but I don't have to get up at crazy hours like I used to. So I'd have time to get some work done. And I'm actually looking at, we were doing 4 days a week. I'm looking at 5 days a week to just have, because it's just been so nice to have time.
I think you should push for a full 8 days a week. Child care will be the way you need to go.
It's well, I realized it wasn't that much more expensive between 4 days and 5 days. It's and I could use that time. So yeah, that's been the big change, and dictation is working pretty well for me. So I'm excited about that. Yeah, that's kind of the main big change. It feels like I just can't believe that 2021 is we're already on the downslide.
It's ripping past.
Right.
It's so crazy.
Yeah. And that's it for me.
What about you, Scotty?
Well, so I'd kind of been just kind of slowing down all year. The year's going faster and the writing progress has been going slower. And probably 8 days ago, because I like 8 today. That's really the number of the show, if anybody cares for later. Yeah, I got super motivated. The whole family got super on board with the support mechanisms. Because a lot of times people always say they want to support you, but they don't really know how. I don't blame family or friends or coworkers, but they'll say, yeah, you should go write, but then they, immediately need something or whatever. But I've been writing like a fiend for a while. So I'm very happy about that. And it feels good. That's the big thing. It's not so much that I want to say, listen how many words I got. I want to go down and feel good about what I did every day. And when I hit something that satisfies the goal, doesn't have to be specific, then I really like that. So that's been going great. I've been working on Reaper 11. I think it's going to be the best Reaper ever, the best Reaper of the series. It's hard to explain without giving lots of spoilers, because it's really difficult to restart a book after it's book 11.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's been a couple of years. Well, a year.
Yeah, February middle of February 19 is when the first one went, and people are still asking for it over in Cheney's reader group. But the thing is, he's so powered up by book 10, but like, how do you take somebody all the way to the bottom,
Right?
still make it interesting? So I guess it's not too much of a spoiler, but he developed all this crew and his friends and all these people throughout 10 books. Well, that's all stripped away from him. But the first book kind of is a series of reintroducing him to a few key aspects of technology. There's a big mystery in it, which I like, and picking up some of his old friends. And the way it does it, I'm trying to do it kind of in what he called a surprising but inevitable kind of way, how he would run it again. So I'm really loving that. Blue Sun Armada, which calculator edited, Kayleen's edited 1 million words. That's a
Nice.
ton of editing.
Nice.
You should get like probably some sort of medal for that for sure.
Agreed.
The last thing that's not like life related is work. Blue Sun Armada, I use Plottr to outline it. After Josh's thousands of encouragements, I outlined it much more thoroughly. And I started using Plottr, and you know me with my tech glitches, I won't even talk about that. I always screw something up. But what I was doing is I was using Plottr, and you can't write in Plottr. Like, it's not Scrivener or Word, but there's a comment section where you can put comments for each beat. Well, I was just writing a chapter in each of those as I went, as it kept me from going back, and I was writing one character arc all the way through, kind of like Richard Fox always used to do when we were working with him. And I've since exported that to Scrivener and done that in Scrivener, but I've stuck with writing one character arc all the way through, and I'm really liking it. And I think it's going to make a deeper, probably more sensible story, kind of on that instinctive level, kind of the subliminal stuff that is just a little bit more solid and put together. So I'm liking that too. I fell down. I can't remember if we talked about this last time. I fell down some stairs and twisted my knee back behind my head. So I've been kind of limping around for a week and a half, and just a lot of stuff. Thinking about moving and put a deposit down on a house over closer to Josh, so we can do shows in the same locale.
In walking distance.
Yeah, practically. Yeah,
You'll never get rid of him.
I know. Yeah, because Josh and I live in the same town. We see each other like twice a year. I'm a horrible friend, but I'm pretty excited about that. I've always wanted to live over on the west side. Thanks, Walt. I appreciate that. I was looking at the comments, and that's about it. I'm just doing pretty good, except that I'm pretty tired. But I'm drinking my first coffee, so that's the best coffee. Is the first one.
That's true.
Probably going to be talky the whole show now.
I ran out of coffee, and I was very sad. And then I didn't want to brew another pot, because then inevitably I only drink like half the pot, and I feel like I waste the coffee.
Oh, I don't care. I'll brew a pot for one sip and then throw it away and go to bed.
Oh, let's see. Walt joined us. Hey, Walt. Willow is here. Trucker Charlie's in Vernon, Illinois today, listening to the show. Awesome. Walt says, "You guys going to be roomies?" I mean, close enough. Close enough. I'll ride my bike to Scott's house, and we'll hang out.
I'll ride my scooter. We'll meet you halfway. And
when the sun goes down, and the wife starts sending me text messages, I'll just ignore them. And then when I get home, I was like, "Oh, I didn't get them."
Yeah,
that was weird.
My wife, I told her she can just lean out the door and whistle, like,
yeah. Time to come home, kids.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, updates for me. It's been a crazy week. Today is the first day of school for my first grader, and so we dropped her off today, and then tomorrow and every day else she'll be riding the bus. So it's a good change, because I don't have to spend a combined like hour in the car every day dropping off and picking up. I can just go down to the end of our cul-de-sac, put her on the bus at about 8, and then she doesn't get off the bus till like 4:30. So I'm like, I've got all day, and then my youngest still goes to preschool, so I still got to drop him off and on, but only takes like 20 minutes to do that, so it's not a huge deal.
And you live in a great school district. That's most of the reason we moved over there, actually, is we want to get into that school district.
I think you'll be in our same school district.
We yep.
Anyway, so that's fun. And I don't know who has a parent here watching the show that has one child or multiple children. But if you have multiple children, especially young ones at home, it's a pain in the butt. But if you only have one, they usually tend to like just go play by themselves. Well, mine do at least, and don't bother me. And the big thing is they're not fighting. He doesn't have anybody to fight. And so I don't have to referee all day. He can play with his toys and stuff, and I can get some work done. So that's a good change. It's going to be an upward swing on my productivity. For those of you who still track your words on the KeyStroWriMo document, look, this is going to shock everybody. I added words to the KeyStroWriMo document this week, and I've done it every day except today. I haven't documented my words today.
You should write at least one and put it in there.
Yeah. Well, I've written words. I just haven't updated the sheet.
Okay.
I have this big TV that's mounted on my wall over here, and normally nothing's hooked up to that. But the other day I hooked up my Mac to it, and then I sit like way across the room and put my feet up almost like I'm in a recliner with a Bluetooth keyboard, and I just sit there and type. And because I don't have a mouse like readily available, I can't click over to like do internet or anything like that.
Fairly brilliant. That's pretty brilliant.
So like the other day I was sitting there and I mean, it is kind of a pain to kind of navigate through the document without a mouse, but it's not hard. And so I've actually upped my productivity a little bit, and that's big for me, not being able to scroll through different things. And so I'm working on Sentinel, or it's called Sentinel now. It could be called something else when it's done. I got about 30,000 words written on it, and that's going back and kind of rewriting a whole bunch of the beginning chapters. I've come up with a whole bunch more tech that I'm kind of sliding into the early chapters to have it make sense later on, developing the characters a little bit more. And it's been a lot of fun. It's been a blast. Devin and I worked out the kind of the big plot moments for the third book in the Tranquility series. He's had kind of a fairly significant family thing happen over there, so he's kind of out of the loop here for a while. But we've got the book, the bones kind of created, and so we'll start putting those pieces together here over the next couple of weeks and months, and start the ball rolling on Tranquility 3.
And when does book 2 launch on that one?
It's already out. It came out.
That's right. It did launch. Okay.
Yep, came out last week. Doing fairly well. It's not breaking any sales records by any means, but it's doing fairly well. Getting some good reviews. And all the reviews we're continuing to get on book 1 are pretty favorable as well. We've got some really big things planned for book 3. And I think it's going to be really fun and kind of give it a good circular wrap to the whole series. And so that's going to be fun. Let's see what else. Oh, I got the official notification that I got into Rob Howell's Talisman, something in Talisman, Monsters in Talisman. Now I can't even remember what the anthology is called. It's one of the new imprints for CKP Publishing.
Oh, nice.
Well, goodness gracious, now I can't think of Rob Howell. I'll look him up.
What's is it a concept anthology or?
So it's the new imprint's going to be a fantasy imprint, and so he's doing 2 anthology. Okay, so the one I'm in is Talons and Talismans, I think is what mine's called. I think he's doing 2 anthologies. One that's going to publish in October and one that's in November. I'm in the one that's going to publish in October. And I just found out today that Kevin J. Anderson's going to be in that anthology too. So
nice.
That's pretty freaking sweet. Casey Azell is in that anthology. So is Rick Partlow, Mark Wandry, and a couple others, Casey Moore, Scott Huggins. So a pretty good collection of authors on a short story that I'd written basically 2 years ago and hadn't done anything with. And that short story is basically like a precursor to a big epic fantasy series that I'm working on that'll hopefully get picked up this year. And so, yeah, that's pretty fun. That's cool. I got the notification of that yesterday. So, yeah,
I still like the short story the 2 short stories that we wrote for Chris Kennedy.
Yes.
Boss was the one. That's probably my favorite short story I've written ever. I loved it so much.
The what was it? For a few dollars more, that anthology.
It's for a few dollars more, I believe.
Yeah.
There's just a couple of those. Yeah.
Most of those anthologies are pretty good to be a part of.
Yeah. They're the best anthologies I've ever been in. Now, you've been in a couple other, some TradPub ones and stuff like that, but they do really well. He gets that done somehow. So very, very cool.
I agree. He does a really good job.
I don't know if we're talking specific money here, but if we're talking about publishing and making a living at it, anthologies are really great for lots of reasons, but you shouldn't expect to make a ton of money off of them. I'll get that out.
I've only been in like 2 that made good money. The rest I kind of saw as like a marketing or networking thing.
Yeah. And 99% of the time, the networking that you gain from a good anthology is worth way more than they could have probably paid you for it anyway. Careers can be made from that. You just got to pick the right one or get lucky.
Yep.
Or both.
So that's all pretty much my update, I think. Moving right along and getting some work done. In 2 weeks, my son will be in school. And so that means 5 days a week, at least for half the day, I'll have an empty house. And then for the afternoon, I'll have half an empty house.
And you should also block my phone and computer so I don't send you technical problems all day. He's like, I'm writing great. Scott just had a complete fucking meltdown with his computer. I think I'll spend all day listening to him fucking go crazy.
Whenever I hear the phone go, bzz, 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 those are like of text messages coming in from God, and I look and I've got 18 messages and they're all like 3 words long. What? I can't.
Yeah, you need like a word strainer, and you take your text and you pour them in there, and it collects all the profanity, and all the message comes out the bottom, and it's just be a little short.
Like a Scott translator.
Yeah, exactly. Because I don't know what I do. I think it's magic. I think it's a magic curse.
Well, let's talk about the magic, like making the magic happen.
The good magic.
Magic.
It's not the dark magic of computer crashes. And
Aileen says monetary should not be why you submit to an anthology. I agree. Well, let's talk about this a little bit because
kids need food, Kayleen.
That's true.
Mama's got to
take your kids away if you don't feed them.
But Mama's needs a new pair of shoes. I got to ask this question, not a lot, but a few times. But I see the question a lot just out there, out on the World Wide Web and Facebook and other places where people are like, I think I want to be a writer. What's your best advice? And I asked the question in the group yesterday, and I got several good answers. We'll talk about those in a minute. But we brought this up in our writers group, and we were talking about wanting to be a writer. And then now with self-publishing, you can just decide, I'm going to be a writer and then publish. And, a lot of people.
Which is a great thing.
It is a great thing, but I also think it's a bad thing too.
Yeah.
Because people like you and James and I, we've been doing it for a really, really, really long time. And maybe just now are starting to make progress in what we're doing in our craft. I've been writing since I was 14 years old. And I've only been published since 2012. So 9 years. But so it's really hard for somebody like for me, because I want to be a writer. What should I do? And my initial response would be, well, write for 10 years and then come back to me and talk to me. I mean, because that's the legitimate,
right.
I can't say, because there's no for instance, in art, you can take an art class and you can learn how to do art and you can see significant progress over time. And you will, you won't just draw a stick figure and ask somebody to give you $100 for it. Right. Like you can see
that's a good analogy actually, because that's kind of the mentality sometimes.
Right. You're not going to draw a stick figure and then use a crayon and draw all over it and then hand it to somebody and say, I think this is worth $100. I'm going to make a living at this. You're going to be practicing for a long time. you're going to draw stick figures, then you're going to draw square figures, then you're going to, it's going to flesh out over time, and you're going to improve, and people are finally going. It's different because with books, it takes a little bit of time. Like the person has to have a time investment to say, yeah, you're good at it. But with art, you can look at it and go, oh, that's a really good painting, or that's
there is a certain bit of a crucible to go through to finish a book, because that's why up until like the NaNoWriMos or NaNoWriMo, however you want to say it, came up, the common perception was that it took a lifetime to write a book.
Right, to write one book.
Like if you said, I finished a book, it was an amazing, and it is an amazing accomplishment, because finishing a book, so you do kind of get some trial by fire by completing a novel length work.
Right.
But you should probably throw that novel away.
Like talking about, like we were talking about short stories earlier. I think it used to be that was the meta, right? Like you make your bones writing short stories, and then you get into novel writing, and you don't have to do that anymore. I used to not like writing short stories because I didn't think I was any good at it. And so I would write novels, but then I would get, disheartened halfway through because I didn't know what I was doing, and I would quit. My opinion on short stories is they're great practice for finishing a story, whether they pay a whole bunch of money or not. Like you take a thread and you finish it, and that is it's like that. How do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. You create a character. That's really
yeah. The argument could be made that everybody should write short stories, even if they don't intend to publish them or share them, just as a drill.
100%.
I think being really good at short stories is a different skill, but they're still very useful. Yeah, and just envisioning a whole story, following it all the way through, and then expanding on that. But one thing I wanted to touch on, Josh, the idea of writing for 10 years, I've been thinking about a lot actually, is that like a lot of times, like, what does it take to be a writer? Well, you have to write. And then even like, I remember one of my first jobs, I was a reporter. I first started out as a reporter in my hometown, and one of the first jobs they had me do was write obituaries, and people would like submit. Yeah. Like the job that task consisted of taking a form the family would fill out and then using that info to like write the obituary. Right. And you didn't want to get too flowery about it. Like you just wrote the obituary, but I wrote one that I still think about quite often, a writer that had written like a fantasy trilogy when they were young, and the family, they put it in, like, obviously they were proud of it because they put it in the obituary, but like the guy wrote one trilogy and never wrote anything else. And I think about that quite often with a lot of writers, especially like these transitions we're going through of like mid-list writers that get dropped by their publisher or whatever. Like the only thing that makes you not be a writer is to stop writing. Like you can ultimately
the number one cause of failure is quitting.
Is to quit. Right. And I think if you stick with it long enough, like, and I think maybe we could come back to this, but if you're sticking with it consistently over time and producing work and telling stories and improving yourself, you will be published eventually, no matter how you end up doing it. It's just most people don't. It's like The Long Walk by Stephen King, right? Like people are just like, eventually you get to the people that are published and everybody else kind of falls by the wayside because they just don't stick it out.
I'm going to insert something short and then to get out of your way because you're still talking, but I went to a conference years ago, and this author who is a best-selling romance author said, if you show me an author who legitimately writes 20 hours a week, I mean, nothing else but pure writing where they're focused, she said, then I'll show you a future best-selling author. And that sounds simple, but if you've actually done it and logged the time, that is actually really hard to do. And if you do that, you'll be amazed at how far you get, especially if you put it into one thing and not 50 projects like me. But anyway, but it goes into what you're saying.
Well, and I think part of like getting back to the kind of market we're in now, it used to be you would just like beat yourself up sending in stuff to publishers. Well, now you can publish and you can take that first thing that you wrote. And I guess when I look back on what I would tell somebody to do is just finish. I've talked about this in the last marathon author thing. Like just finish the thing, get it out there, because we're in a time now where you got to get feedback and like learn to process feedback of the readers, not editors, not your writers group, not people that aren't going to buy the book, like your readers. And then you take that and you learn or don't learn from however that book did and move on to the next thing, and I think that's really, if I was going to look at somebody 10 years ago, that is the most useful thing.
Well, and the other thing that you need to know as brand new is that you might write a fabulous book, but it does not mean it's going to be successful. But you still got to do it. So you got to be careful, because writing, you're really putting yourself out there. I mean, you're putting yourself on display. It can be very traumatic to get some of that feedback.
Well, that was one of the.
So you got to be ready. You got to be ready to do brilliant work, but that's not the one that makes it. Something else you think is half as good might connect with people better, and that's the one that you're successful with. You just don't know.
I think one of the cons, like I was saying about the self-publishing time that we're in, is like you're saying, James, you can write it and put it out there and see what people think about it. But if that's the first thing you've ever written, it's probably not going to be very good. It could be. It's probably not going to be very good. And then your potential to continue to sell under that name and that medium will probably be hindered a lot. And a lot of people don't think about that when they're like, I just finished my first book, I'm going to publish it. I'm like, nah, pump the brakes, because if you want to be published under your name,
right,
and you publish a book that is not good, not to say you didn't put your best effort into it, but a lot of people, my first books suck. Like
everybody's first book sucks.
Everybody's first book sucks, and then first drafts suck, and like there's a lot of suck that happens in writing that it just takes time to polish and make better. But my recommendation is to write a couple of books and then put
them in a shell in a drawer someplace.
And a lot of people say like their process, like in a lot of trad publishing, is I write a book and I put it away for 3 or 4 months, work on something else, and then come back to it. I don't know that I would necessarily do that. I would write the first book and then put it away and use it as a learning experience, and then continue to write something else and make your craft better. Because if you still focus on that one book that is probably not any good, it doesn't have anything to do with the writing, just the story, the narrative, all the structure aspect. It takes a lot of time to learn how to do those things well. And you could get stuck in a rut where you're continuously rewriting that book over and over and over and over again, or you publish it, it's out for a couple of months. Then you're like, I can do better this time. And you unpublish it and you edit it and you rewrite it and you repackage it and you put it back up. It still doesn't do well. 6 more months go down. Like, I'm such a better author now. I pull that book down, rewrite it, and you get in this kind of
that happens a lot, actually.
Yeah.
I think you have done the same thing.
You get to a point where you realize that it takes more time to fix something that wasn't conceived properly than just to go write something new.
100%. Yeah, I was going to say, if you're going to rewrite that, you should just take it, print it, set it on the desk next to you, but don't look at it, and just start with a blank page, write that book again.
Yeah.
And that might be much better. I've actually had a couple of books, like you said, James, where I was like, I finally just gave up and started over, because it was just trying to fix something, and you're going back to chapter 3 to see what it does in chapter 9, and you've already screwed it up 8 times, and just, it's torture.
But because like the way Amazon works, like you could start with a pen name and then learn your lessons, and then move over to the, your protected actual name, if that's what you want to do. And
you can start with a little bit of ghostwriting. I've often wondered when is a good time to ghostwrite. And actually, it's not a bad idea, because you can get some coaching and mentoring by somebody who's successful. And I'm careful about ghostwriters, because I feel like a ghost author could be taken advantage of. But I think there's a time when they're a very good deal, especially if you don't want to put your name out there yet, or you want to write a different genre that you're not known for. But so what we're talking about, and this is something I want to hit, I don't want to dwell on it too much, is we're talking about people just starting. And where I find the biggest problem with, because I encourage everybody to write. I love writing, because the more people that write, the more people I can sit around and geek out about writing stuff.
Right.
And and it's just fun. And everybody here, I'm sure, that's in our group right now has probably been writing for a while. But even if you haven't written before, you got to start sometime.
Yeah. And
the thing is you start writing when you're 50, you can write for 30 years and still be writing when you're 80.
Yep.
It's not like you're starting to play lacrosse when you're 50, that's maybe a bad career choice. I don't know. But what gets me upset is there's a huge predatory practice with targeting writers as a result of the indie community. And so you see all these, and I block them mercilessly on my Facebook feed, because they'll pop up and they'll say, write your memoir and start earning a 6-figure salary easily. And I'm like, memoirs are like literally the hardest thing to sell unless you're a famous celebrity, because everybody has an interesting story. Everybody's had a hard life. And so people like, they come into, they're like, you know what? I've never written a book before. I don't really like to read, but this thing says I can change my life and I can free this horrible experience I'm in by just sitting down, and I'll write this book and then everything will be okay. And I think there's a lot of those writers out there that if that's your reason, it's not a good reason. Well, it's going to be very disappointing, and somebody's going to take your money to publish it for you.
There are easier ways to make money is the thing.
Oh,
so there are easier ways to make money than writing.
Even when you're successful at publishing, like I consider myself to be successful at publishing, and it would probably be way easier for me to go back and get a full-time job someplace to make that money.
I guarantee it.
And so that's the thing too. And a lot of people in the Facebook group their comments are, enjoy the process, keep writing every day, like you're saying, write every day, and that's key. Like if you're coming to this and you're like, I saw Andy Weir self-publish The Martian, and now he's a quasi billionaire. Like that's not going to happen for you. Like it's if you like to spend your time when you're not at work or not dealing with family or whatever, jotting in a notebook, writing a story, then I think that this is a career for you, and it
absolutely should do it.
Something that you should
on some level
get into, and whether it's indie publishing or traditional or hybrid, there's like Luke Barnett in the group mentioned Athon Books. I'm published by Athon Books. Scott is, James is. If he's not, he will be soon.
At some point.
A good hybrid publisher is a really good way to go, especially just getting into it.
If you can find a good one, then that is absolutely. And we should, after you're done, we should talk about how to find a good one and what to watch out for.
Yeah. I think like something that Scott and I that helped our careers immensely is co-writing, especially with someone who has a successful career already. Like Scott and I wrote with Richard Fox. James, you wrote with Mal Cooper and Jeff Chaney. Scott wrote with Jeff Chaney. Those are not only are they significant in that you can make money. It's just instead of just putting a book out by yourself and maybe making $5, that the monetization of writing with an established writer makes more sense financially speaking. Just starting out, but just the learning process, like learning, like I still write sometimes the way that Richard lined.
I talked about that in the show. Is I call it the Richard Fox method. When you write one character arc all the way through, it's good.
Well,
and I use the brackets that he uses in his outline.
Brackets all the time, and it's not only is it a learning experience, but then it's. You take what they do instead of just you kind of fumbling through it. You can see what they do and what's made it successful. You can take some of it, make some of it your own. You do it a different way. But like you mentioned, doing the beta reading and putting it out there and letting people read it. Sometimes it's like movie critics. Somebody saying like, I didn't like this movie. Why? I don't know. But a movie critic, like an actual movie critic, can kind of break it down and say, this is why. It's like reading a story and not liking the book, but like if you have a beta reader who's a reader and they really like your story, oh, why? Oh, because your character was so cool, they did this. Or somebody says, I didn't like your story, but they can't really articulate why, like as a writer, why you don't like the story or what didn't work. Was it the structure? Was it the narrative? Was it the prose? Was it the POV that you had? A writer can do that much better than a beta reader. And granted, those type of opportunities aren't very numerous.
I think you also have to be careful with writers as beta readers because you're not going to write the same. And,
I was talking about the collaboration aspect.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Gotcha.
It's not as readily available as you would think, but I think that it's more. You have more of a shot doing that than. Definitely going traditional published, but also publishing and putting a book out there and then having it fail, or get even a hybrid publisher.
Well, in trad, you're only really getting feedback from like your agent potentially, and then your editor. That's like two people, and then the book either sells or doesn't sell, or you get reviews on it that are like, oh, why didn't we catch this stuff? So I think I was going to mention one thing before we move on with beta readers. Like I guess I like people that are not editors or writers because they're just reading a book for pure enjoyment.
Yeah.
And I just ask them, tell me where you were bored or confused. Like
Yep.
I ask them, I don't want them to overthink anything. Just tell me where you were bored and confused. And then I'll go back and look at what might be like, if 4 people tell me that same thing, okay, this chapter is too long or what, I can go back and look at that. But one thing I wanted to touch on as well that I've had the opportunity to talk with 2 new writers recently that were kind of in that stage where they finished a book or they're about to finish a book and want to know what to do with it. And one was really asking me like, where do I really want to find a class or something that will just tell me what to do. And jumping on what Scott had said about like the memoir thing, like there are plenty of people that want to sell shovels, to the gold mines. And speaking of like how people like make it in this business, like I would, as rather than Andy Ware, like I would really look at our friend Rick Partlow and how he has over time, like he published his own work and he learned from it and iterated. And then now he has moved on to working with publishers and really has nailed and understands both his readers and his genre. But he did that over time. Like that took him, I think he said 9 years.
And he writes when we first met him at 20 books in 2018, we met Rick. He would write between breaks at 20 books. He'd pull his computer, he was writing. I mean, the guy writes and he doesn't do a lot of extra stuff in the publishing realm. And that's another thing. When you're new, you need to just probably put all your effort into kind of one thing. It's real tempted to go, well, okay, I'm writing. Well, I can also make a little money making book covers, and I'm going to do formatting, and I'm going to start a podcast. And like by the time you get done, you're doing 5 or 6 things in addition to your full-time job. And you're like, I can't find time to write. Well, there's a reason for that. You should put focus.
Right. Only podcasts are kind of weird like that. Like, I mean,
they're fun.
They're fun, but it's just if you like to hear yourself talk, like I do.
And meet some people.
But you're not necessarily going to get readers through a podcast. So focus on the thing that's going to get readers, and that's writing your book.
Josh and I met Richard. We had some. Good.
I was going to say the only caveat I'll say to the podcast thing, and then I want to get to one of the comments in the chat, is that a lot of like Keystroke was kind of developed backwards than from a lot of other podcasts. A lot of other podcasts, you have a famous author that starts a podcast, and then the podcast is successful because he is a famous author, and so all his readers and all these other writers want to come and listen to the podcast, and then become successful because he's already successful as an author. Scott and I did it backwards, and we started a show and didn't know anything about what we were doing, but starting the show made us successful authors, not because we were making money off the show, but because of the connections that we made.
We met people.
Yeah, networking is definitely
and good people.
We met Richard Fox. I think Richard was our 6th guest we'd had on the show. Ralph Byrne, who was a co-host for a really long time, he was our very first guest, and he got us into 2 anthologies, 3 anthologies.
Hooked us up with Nathan Heisted.
Yep, and that kind of made me flex my short story writing muscle. And so now I've submitted to several short stories, dozens of short stories I have published now. But all that is from the show. So I will say that doing all, like you're saying, cover and format and all this other stuff, learning marketing, all that stuff is nice if you already know how to write.
Yes.
Like you have to have the writing down. Like that's key. If you want to be a writer, you have to write. That's what everybody says in our group. It's what everybody says as an author. You have to write. If you have a 20-year career, in marketing, then you should obviously use that resource. 100%.
I
think one of the things that has helped me a lot in the last year is our propellers group, and that goes to Kit's comment. Kit loves my critique group, but they are slow, 2,500 words a month. I think critique groups. I have never been a part of one until I was in our group, and I think it took a little while for us to kind of find our stride and where we were comfortable at doing different things. But now, I put up, 3 sample chapters that I was submitting a couple of weeks ago. And because we've been a part of this group and we know how things work, it's not just you join a group and you're giving somebody a thing to read. We know each other. We've been talking for about a year. And so I put up these sample chapters. Can you please read this and give me your thoughts? And almost everybody within days gave me responses on I think it was 8,000 words or something like that.
Well, I think one thing with this group too, to touch on that, is that we all have a really clear idea of what everybody's trying to accomplish. And sometimes, depending on your critique group, you might have different people trying to accomplish different things. And so 2,500 words a month might work for you, or if you're trying to write a book a month, like that's not going to work.
Absolutely.
And, but whatever works for you.
McLaughlin just created a Facebook group where the minimum, like, it's not a requirement, but this is where we're trying to get is 2 million words a year
for each author.
I'm not even going to look in that group.
Yeah. for each author or for the whole group?
For each author.
Each author.
Each author.
That's Kevin. Well,
that's crazy.
Yeah, that's great.
One thing I wanted to touch on, like I think there's a couple of things noting about like the way you started Keystroke. Like you put a constraint, like you were basically learning in public, and you kind of put this, like, I'm going to be accountable. And so you guys, I think maybe either inadvertently or purposefully found a way to be accountable to the public, which has obviously helped you. And then also, like, when I look back on like the last 10 years, of my being a writer, I hate to say it, but like I definitely have submitted to a lot of places, and there's been like 2 times I got into a place through a blind submission. Otherwise, it's all been networking, and it really came down to like knowing the editor. People at least knew who I was because of like they can. I mean, as much as I don't like Facebook, like you can look on Facebook and see, okay, who is this person? What have they done? There's some credibility there. Now that I have like a backlist in Amazon, people can look at that. People do look at sales. Like, okay, how do their books do? All right, this is a person that would benefit me to have them, in their anthology. And it's just so much. It's been very different than like blind submissions to magazines like I used to do.
Yeah.
But that's been a big, like I would say, networking. If I could look back too, that's one thing I do think is really valuable. Like if networking with other writers, finding writers that are in the same wavelength as you, trying to accomplish the same thing. And the internet has made that.
You enjoy being around. You enjoy working.
Yeah,
with.
You like being around. That's a big part of it too. Like people will suck your energy. Like you don't want to, or put you down, or put your writing down. Like you don't need that.
Yeah, kick them to the curb.
Yeah,
immediately. So I think we talked a little bit about finding a small press, because in like today's indie publishing or new pub is way different than 2011, 2012 new pub, where you could make pretty good money by accident back then. And lots of people who were very successful, who've kind of fallen off now, they will tell you that is they did a bunch of stuff and everything worked. I mean, you literally hardly could fail because you were brand new. It was a new thing. Everybody was excited. And everybody was buying like 100 books a month if they read them or not, because the Kindle was a brand new device.
Yep.
So I think now there's much more value to having a strong collab, because a strong collaborator, like in my case especially, will be basically a small publisher.
They are.
They have like Cheney he has on-staff editors, he's on-staff book formers, he has a beta reader team of like 35 people to look for proofreads.
Yep.
He has an advertising budget and some personal assistants, and he spends a lot of money advertising books. And so
to touch on what you just said, Scott, like if you're going to work with somebody like this, make sure they know how they were successful. Like sometimes you've got people that will get to a certain point and they're like, their books maybe are flagging off, or they're not quite sure how they got where they were. And so their solution is to bring in up more writers. And that's not going to help anybody.
Right.
Because like touching on the hybrid, like the pay model, like a lot of times it's a royalty share or royalty split in certain ways. And so it doesn't help you to have a royalty split with somebody who's not going to sell or not going to promote your book, or not going to at least guarantee like a certain level of editing, quality of cover. You could just do that yourself, and then
absolutely
at least make 70% of the royalty as opposed to 35% of Amazon's.
Right. And so you have Aethon, and Aethon is one we're all familiar with, but I'm sure there's a few other, but there are a lot of bad ones out there, and a lot of them are not necessarily malicious, although some are. But a lot of them are just like, they want to be successful. They want you to be successful too. They're going to make a pot. Sometimes like 3 or 4 friends get together and say, we're going to pool our resources. You're good at marketing. I'm good at, at graphics and Photoshop, and let's all pool our resources and do this together. And that's not necessarily bad or wrong, but there are a few huge red flags. Like the most obvious one is if they want you to pay any kind of fee.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always been something. If an agent, submission company in trad publishing or new publishing, or even like a collaborator, like I had met somebody who wrote really hard for somebody, and they were like expected to share a lot of the expenses and put the money up front.
Mm-hmm.
And this is for the writer who's just starting, who doesn't have any money. And the big name author who has all the money is like, why are they making you cough up $500 if they're making hundreds of thousands a year? It just doesn't make any sense. So my big thing is, your first thing is, if you're looking for like a small press or any type of publisher, and they want to charge you money for anything, that's probably an immediate red flag to say, I'm not doing that.
I see so many people still on Facebook on several groups. And it blows my mind, because the amount of new authors that come to the indie realm is staggering. Every day new people are, deciding they want to be authors. And it blows my mind, the amount of people that post on these groups and say, hey, I found this publisher, but they're wanting me to pay $1,000 for a printing fee or something like that. Oh. I got an email just the other day on my city email, which is crazy to me, talking about getting and they had a this I think would get a lot of authors, and I need to like post about it, but it had a picture of my book.
Yes.
But it was weird because it was the second book in the series, not the first book in the series. And they were like, we love this book. And it was Bloodlines. I wrote it years ago, and we think it's going to get this award and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like reading through it. I'm like, what is going on here? Like this, how did you get this email? First of all. But then I get down to the bottom of the email, and they're literally asking for like tens of thousands of dollars to put your book into this thing that they'll say this will give you an award and stuff like that.
So they were just scraping Amazon and then sending out emails.
Yes.
Yeah.
But my thing is, like, it looked like it was personal, right?
Right.
It didn't look like it was generated. And
it's very thrilling at first to be like, oh my God, somebody finally sees my brilliance.
Exactly. 100%. But then you get down to the bottom and like $10,000. Really? Come on. Yeah. But there's a lot of people. I mean, it's still like elderly people that are getting scammed on phone scams. Right. Still, there's people out there that, they do that to 5,000 people. One person says yes, they've just made $10,000.
And I think it's important, to clarify between author services and so-called publishers. Like, and like I would start with contract. Like, whoever it is that's asking to work with you, do they have a contract? And if you say contract, do they get all like, oh, we're friends, we don't need a contract? Mm-hmm. Like, that's kind of a very initial red flag.
Another red flag.
And so there are places out there, like if you're whatever, I'm a working professional, I don't have time to do all the indie stuff. Like, I still think that you should learn it to know what you're buying, but there are services companies out there that all they're providing is the service of creating the book, editing it, and then they give it to you. But anytime somebody wants to upload a book to their Amazon account and you no longer have control of it, that's a huge red flag, and I would want to be very careful with that.
Don't do that unless you are really sure.
Yeah, I watch a lot of YouTube videos based around script writing, only because they talk a lot about story, and you get a lot of like high level talks from people that have been in the business for 20 years, and they say things that I would never have thought of. I was watching this guy, I can't remember his name, but he was talking about Netflix, and he was talking about basically just submitting to films to distributors, and he is a filmmaker. So I analyze, how do I say, I parse that as he's the writer and then he's submitting to a publisher. And he was saying that even after I have successes, I still get no's. Mm-hmm. And his thing was,
of course,
no means not today. That's how he takes no. And so he'll say that for every project you sell, you get 250 no's. And it continued. That's just the business. And he doesn't even even non-responses. He doesn't even take personal, because that's just part of it. Like, he'll send out a response, doesn't get an email, whatever, moves on. Doesn't affect him at all. It's hard to kind of get in that mindset where the no is just part of it. And I think when you were talking about collaborators and different things like that, Scott and I, when we originally worked with Richard, there was a lot of things that Richard came back that we were not happy with, that we were like, oh, this sucks, and like that. And it wasn't no, but it was, this needs to change, or this needs to do something else. And And it would frustrate us because we're like, nah, it's good. I wrote it. It's great. But then we would go back and fix it and be like, oh, Richard was right.
Yeah.
This needed to be fixed here and this needed to be fixed here. And a lot of times either you get a collaborator that doesn't tell you no, and I think that's a red flag too. Because then you're not growing as an author. You're not being forced to look at your words that you're creating and say, this could be better.
And they probably don't know their target audience, because a good collaborator will know what their audience wants. And that's a big thing with, if you're collaborating, is they have to have an audience already, because that's one of the most important marketing tricks, is to have 10,000 people that are going to read your book on day one.
Right.
Which, you know, how can you fail at that point?
Well, I think being okay with no, I think that's whether it's traditional publishing or indie publishing, or either people leaving bad reviews on your stuff, you're going to like being okay with no is a baseline for being a writer.
Yeah. There's a book called Go for No, which basically talks about
novel writer or a screenwriter or a short story writer. No is just part of being a writer. And I think the sooner a beginning writer can be okay with no, the sky's the limit at that point.
And that's something to internalize too. I think so when you're first starting out and you think about, like, you've been working on that one book for so long, you finally finish it, which is awesome. Well, now as soon as I tell you need to write book 2 and book 3 so that you have something you could package and sell, because that's what the market really wants right now, is box sets. Like, people are so burned out by unfinished series, by authors that just jumped in, wrote book 1 and then disappeared, that having just that finished series sets you ahead of the pack right there.
100%.
But then even to recognize that, okay, that box set maybe is not as good as it could have been. So it's time to differentiate, have new products. Like, what product out there? Like, we tend to think of writing as special, but what product in the supermarket, at the liquor store, like wherever, is there only one of that thing? And you expect people to just buy that to all ends of the earth. Like, no, everybody gets choices, right? How many types of Coke are there? Pepsi, whatever, LaCroix, how many different flavors are there?
Right.
Yeah. And that way, as a writer, I think you have to have that same mindset and not be overly invested, or be ready to tweak and adjust and do something new. You can't just hang out, you're not JD Salinger. You can't write one book and expect that to sustain you. It's not going to work.
And having a series is just so much easier to market, because you have a better return on investment. You can spend a little bit more money on ads once you get to that point, or have somebody do it for you, where, if you have 10 books and if somebody read all 10 books, you'd make like $37 or whatever. But if you have one book and your profit margin is $2, then you can spend $2 per reader to get that book, and that's probably not going to be enough to get eyes on it.
Yeah.
Well,
again,
marketing.
Andy Ware is like not a good example, because you look at how many books does that guy have? Like, what's his read through now? 3 books.
Yeah. I tell you what a great example is Edge of Valor, my first solo book. And the reason it's a great example is because I banked that in my mind. That was the book that was going to kill it for me.
It is a great book.
Edge of Valor.
I liked it.
Well, it's a great book.
Yeah. David Weber, giving you a book blurb on the front. I mean, the thing is good.
It's a great book. I love it. It's one of my favorite books I've ever worked on. People that have read it love it. They'll tell me that they like it. But when that book published, in my mind, I was like, this book is going to be my gateway to David Weber money. And it didn't do all that. Now, it was still successful, don't get me wrong, but it did not put me into that tier where I was like, yes, I only get to write a book a year. That wasn't it. And so then I had to pivot and do other things and work on other projects. But then that's also when I made the realization too, this goes back to the beginning, loving the process. Because you have to be able to love just sitting down at the keyboard and working on it. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter how much money you make.
Right. You might as well get a regular job if you hate it.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're not willing to put the time in.
Yeah.
It's probably another show, but the other thing you should do is learn to budget on like a 90 or 6 month basis, 90 day, 6 month basis.
Yes.
Because that's how the money comes in.
It was tough going from getting paid every 2 weeks to now getting paid only every quarter.
Yeah.
I still get paid monthly on some projects, but it's not. It's not like a livable paycheck on those monthly ones. The quarterly one, the payments are the big ones.
They're nice.
Yeah. But still going through that transition from I'm going to get a couple grand this week and a couple grand next week and a couple grand, and now I'm like I'm not getting money till September.
But speaking too of like at least if you finish that early trilogy, even if it didn't hit, and you pivot to something new, I mean, one thing that is very good about this business is that if you do hit with something else, your readers will go back through and find that backlist. And so you never quite know when that, if you have a finished thing that you can attract people to, a different flavor of Coke to show people, they're much more willing to give that one a try because they trust you.
Yep.
And they'll go back and read it,
Well, Scott's experiencing that right now.
It is really fun because I've read all the books, watched all the podcasts about how to re-energize your backlist. But, and it's hard, but then I don't know why I've had some books sell that I haven't even mentioned for like 2-3 years. And all of a sudden a couple of them sell. I'm like, it's just a really neat feeling. It's not making me rich, but I'm like, that's cool, man. Somebody liked this enough to go into my backlist. And that's like the biggest compliment ever, is if they'll read your first stuff and they got to have more. That's fantastic. I really love that. Good stuff.
Well, it's so hard to limit this conversation to an hour, because we could just sit here and kind of just rattle off continuously, like, you could try this and you could try this and you could try this. It's really hard to kind of like condense this conversation down, but I've been wanting to have it for a couple of weeks, and maybe we can continue it on another episode next week and keep talking about it. Because I think it's really important. I like I said, there's new authors coming to this business every day, and there's so many people like me who's been doing it for so long. I don't think about the beginning, like, how do I start?
Because we didn't know how to start. We just kind of did.
Yeah. And how do you go up to a Navy SEAL and like, how do you do this? And the Navy SEAL's like, well, you practice your whole life. You run and you exercise and you shoot, and there's so many things to do.
Do push-ups.
And like in one other part of our lives, when you say, I'm going to start a new business, I'm going to be successful next month. Because most businesses fail for 2 or 3 years. And that's like when you apply for a business loan, they are like, do you have the resources to last for 2 years when you don't make any money?
Kit made a comment just now about heart breathings on YouTube. Has a bunch of videos on writing a series. She says 3 books minimum, 5 to 7 is better. She gives a very, and that's very true.
Look that up.
And I've actually Casey Azell turned me onto this channel, and it's very interesting, the visual way that she presents the information and how she writes. I thought it was a very well put together channel. I don't have the link for it, but if you just type in heart breathings, you'll see it.
Did, and there it is.
Pretty decent show. I would definitely recommend checking that out. But yeah, definitely that's the thing. That's why I'm saying we could talk for hours about this, because there's ways to plan out your first book series to try and make it as successful as possible. And if you're thinking about that stuff while you're writing, it can make your launch more successful than just sitting down and having an idea and writing a book. It's like having an idea to write the book, and you're like, oh, this can happen, but I need this backstory and whatever. And then you write that, but maybe the backstory was the story you should have written in the first place.
Right.
And that would have been the more interesting thing. Or, there's a mystery that happens over here, and that was something that there's so many things that you can sit down and kind of see the granular aspect to the story writing, or just the story in general, that after a while, after being practiced at it, you can see this is
easier to see.
Yeah.
But speaking to that question of like how many books, I think especially for Josh, like the thing is there, like you finished that series at least. And so now if you go back, or at least it ended in a place that's satisfying for the reader. Yeah. And so like that, like I don't want to say planning for failure, but this is like a whole other discussion. Like when you plan the series, if it doesn't take off the way you want at a certain point, at least it's done to a certain amount, and Lindsay Baroker talks about this a lot, where she has a series that didn't sell. And so she needed to pivot, but she hadn't finished it. And so now readers are always asking her, but the biggest difficulty is that it's hard to market a series that's not at least finished in some satisfying way. So
the last thing I'd like to say on this today, at least, is that this conversation, hopefully people don't take it as a downer, because we love to talk to writers. We love our writers, our writer friends, and all of our peers and everybody. And I really am excited for people. If you watch this as the first thing you've ever done, and you're like, oh, should I be a writer? And you've never heard of us before.
They're like throwing their papers up.
Like, I hate you. You guys are jerks. But I really get excited to think we're going to talk to more writers about it. And I think it's awesome. I love everybody that's here, and I hope we can keep doing this together. But I think that as a good human being, it's wrong to encourage somebody who doesn't really even want to write
Oh yeah.
to write, because I think a lot of those predatory practices, that's what they're doing, and that's not helping people. You're not being a good friend if you say you should. It's kind of like if somebody told me you should go play basketball. I'm like, I am not good at basketball and I'm not nearly tall. It's just no way in hell.
Yeah.
But if you try to sell me a bunch of basketball camps to make me an NBA basketball at 51 years old and about 4 feet shorter than a regular talented person, it's just not right. So I hope that we have a lot more people coming to the show and we can talk about this, because I love it.
Yeah. I'd say we can always try to continue it next week, and
sure.
and
this is the best time, I think. What's the tagline? The self-publishing show. This is the best time to be a writer. Like, it really is.
Oh yeah.
You just got to know. It's also, I think, one of the most predatory times to be a writer.
Yeah.
And so it's important, I think, to get realistic advice about what this business is like. And it is a business, and you got to treat it like a business. And people will try and say it's art, and sure it is, but
it can be art. The thing is, it can be both.
Yes.
And really, you can do it as art and you can do it as business, but you really, like you're saying, be realistic about your expectations. If you're doing it as art, you're not doing it for the money. So if you do it as art and you publish it, and you make $5 and you give up because you only made $5.
Don't get mad.
You weren't really doing it for the art. You were doing it for the money. So you really have to be like knowledgeable or cognizant at least about what you want to do with it.
Yeah.
So
again, it takes, in the last thing is, it takes a lot of work. There's no reason you should expect to work less writing. I mean, like, a normal job takes 40 hours a week.
True.
And if you ever tried to write for more than 4 hours straight,
oh god,
like, you ever try to write for 8 hours straight? I mean, I guess you could do 4 hours of writing and 2 hours of marketing and 2 hours of planning your budget or something. That might be a full day's work. But it's like the analogy I like from Prescott, one of his the War of Art book. He talks about, if you're a truck driver, you can't drive, and you have to drive a truck from Chicago to LA to deliver a load. You can't stop in Denver because you're not feeling it. Like,
right. This is, since I started calling myself a writer as my primary occupation, this is the hardest work I've ever done. I'll be just absolutely upfront about that. It's mentally exhausting. It never stops. And it's hard on your family because you have to create the boundaries around it, or it just never goes away. It's not like any other job where you can just, even a job that was like a salary job that will take 80 hours if you let it. This one's even worse than that.
Well, that's because on a regular job, if you're working 40 hours a week, you're at that job and you're doing that job, and then let's just say whatever job it is, it's going to take you a couple of years to really like get in it. Now I'm really good. Like, so let's just say you're a nurse, right? You've got to go through all the school, you've got to go to the work, and then you're going to be really good at it in 3 or 4 years. And it's all secondhand nature and it's good like that. But that was 40 hours a week, every week for how many years? And now you're talking about doing something part-time and learning it and it's going to take a long time.
Right.
Consistency is so important.
I don't want to discourage people, but it is work. Like, it's fun work. I mean, I'm totally passionate about it, and there's nothing else I'd rather do, because every other job I've had, this is all I was thinking about. So I'd rather just be thinking about one thing. But
true. Very true. Very true.
Yep.
Well, let's wrap it there, guys. And maybe let's come back next week and continue talking about it. I think it's fun to talk about.
Yeah. Totally.
Everybody in the live chat, thank you guys for hanging out with us today. Kit, thanks for your comments. Welcome. I don't know that I've seen your comments before, but this is the first time you're catching the show. Thank you very much. If you're catching the show for the first time and you didn't participate in the live chat, man, that's where it's at, is the live chat.
The live chat is the bomb. There's a couple other people here I didn't see. Quinn, I haven't.
Hopefully we get back into doing kind of a more consistent schedule on a time that works for everybody. I really miss doing it every week. When we don't do it, I feel like we've missed out on something that week. If this is your first time catching us on YouTube or Facebook, subscribe to our channel. You'll get notified when we go live. If it's an inconsistent thing, you always get notified. Just click that button. We try to do it on Tuesdays. You've got the Writer's Journey on Fridays. You've got the Marathon Author that comes out. Is it Wednesdays that you do your?
It was supposed to be Thursdays, but I'm trying to be more consistent with that too.
Everybody's trying to be consistent. But anyway, thank you guys for coming out and hanging out with us there in the live show. If you're listening on the audio feed, thanks for picking us up on your phone and listening to us wherever you're at. If you've got a free Tuesday afternoon, come out and hang out with us in the live show. We always love to see
Bring
you.
friends.
Bring every friend you can. All right. Well, thanks everybody for being here. We will come back next week. We're going to talk about some reading, some writing, and everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium. Peace.
Cool. Thank you. See you later.